Maybe don't know. Maybe
This time, next time to build. This 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 time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 17 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. Where to start? I am on a rest day today, having just finished up a stretch of 9 days straight climbing here in the red. And if you were wondering if 9 days is too much, let me just go ahead and confirm that for you that, 9 days is too much. It's too many. And I'm going to go ahead and blame that on some guys that actually helped me out. Early in this campaign in the red, when I've been working on, kind of short, bouldery, 13 minuses that I never got done while I was here, that I never put any real time into because they just weren't my style at all. That's what I've been focused on, and I realized pretty quickly that warming up was a pain in the ass, and my skin was failing fast. So I reached out to Tension Climbing. They hooked me up with their new flash board, and I reached out to Rhino Skin Solutions based on the advice of a friend, and they hooked me up with some of their skin products, and I've been going for 9 days since. My skin is great. My warm-ups have gotten better, so thanks to those guys, and damn those guys. I'm going to be doing reviews on the site of both of those products because I really believe in them. But anyway, let's get on with this. Today we've got Arno Ilgner on the podcast. You know Arno from Warrior's Way, and I think you're going to be surprised about some of the things that we talk about in this interview. It's not just about fear of falling, which is kind of the thing he's been made famous for. And we actually go into a little depth in his process recently with athlete Heather Weidner, who is a brilliant climber and was having some difficulties with a route called Simply Red in Rifle, a 13D that she was working on. And she reached out to Arno, or Arno reached out to her after hearing that she had read his material. And they worked together on the route, which Heather subsequently sent. So thanks to Heather for letting us talk a little about your story. And also, I just think that Arno is a really, really smart dude, and he's got this stuff dialed in. And I really appreciate where he's coming from with it, and I look forward to having him on the podcast more. But for now, I'm just going to let you guys jump into this. All right.
Maybe don't know. Maybe
The end result goal can give us vision, give us direction, kind of help us make decisions and take actions that lead us there. But then our primary motivation needs to be the more intrinsic, learning-based motivation, which our process is.
This time to build power. This time
But
to
then we
build
were
power.
doing a business. We were fully committed to that, not wanting to rest.
Yep. Do you want a beer or something before we start? I've got some cold beers in the cooler.
No, I'll
You're
take
good?
one after.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's just jump into it then.
Okay.
So I think most people, when they think of what you do, because you've done this Warrior's Way for quite a long time now. How long has it been?
Officially made the decision in the mid-90s, so it's been roughly 20 years.
Yeah, wow, that's super cool. It's cool to see that it continues to grow. That's cool to watch. But I think what most people think of when they think of the Warrior's Way and when they think of you is the fear of falling thing. I think that seems to be the most prevalent.
That's true.
But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because what I do with these podcasts is I kind of let the person I'm talking to sort of direct me in the subject. If they're super psyched on something, if the guest feels like they're an expert in something, then we can talk about that subject. And I like to go into it with this total beginner mind, like I'm trying to learn from you, because that's what I'm here for, basically. So what we're going to talk about is motivation and
Yes.
goal-based motivation versus process-based motivation.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the falling thing, because even though falling is a really important thing to address, I think it has skewed maybe a lot of more advanced or elite athletes from understanding how they could benefit from the material.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
And so I think, I listened to one of your podcasts. I think it was with Neely, and you mentioned about working with primarily intermediate to advanced athletes, and it's been kind of similar for us with the Warriors Way, because when we schedule a training tour, we go around different parts of the country and advertise it, of course, and then the typical students we get are in that range,
Right.
5'9" to 5'12".
Yep.
And so, in one sense, that's the target market that we're drawing from, but it's also because their particular need with dealing with falling, the material directly addresses it. But there's so much more depth to that than just falling to the material.
Yeah, totally.
And that's really one of the major shifts that we're working on right now, is finding a way to tweak, maybe not tweak, but to emphasize different parts of the material, like motivation, like you mentioned,
Right.
that actually elite athletes are aware that the material can help them in those areas that are particularly useful for them.
Yeah. And you're working with some elite athletes now.
Starting to more so. Heather Weidner is one.
Yep. And we're going to talk a little about Heather's case and what you're doing with Heather today, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did Heather approach you? Like, what was the impetus for her reaching out to you?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I listened to her interview with Neely on Training Beta, when it came out.
Yep.
And she mentioned about Warriors Way helping her, reading the book, The Rock Warriors Way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that piqued my awareness that, hey, she sees the information as valuable, but she had never taken a training class from me. So I think things can tend to coincide, like her need for training and also Warriors Way ability to start approaching elite athletes. It kind of came together at the OR show last August.
It was a win-win for both of you.
Yeah. And so started talking to more elite athletes about doing training with them. Like, what do they have mental training issues and needs that we could work together on? And so I ran into Heather there, and we talked a little bit, and she said absolutely. So I was traveling with one of our trainers, Jeff Lotus, and we decided we were going to Wyoming, and we were going to be heading back through Boulder. And so we had an opportunity to talk with Heather and set the groundwork for beginning to do the training, the coaching. And so Jeff took her through our basic falling commitment clinic so she could understand the core drills and more specifically to understand the core tenets of the material through doing those drills. Because even though we do movement drills and falling drills, which may not be an issue for an elite athlete, it's really not about those drills. It's about getting down to the more core issues of motivation and incremental learning process and use of attention, things like that.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you have drills that really drive home those basics. That's something Nate and I have been working with in our workshops quite a bit, is coming up with drills that really drive home the basics that people tend to overlook. And drills are a really concrete, actionable way for people to dive into it and to see its value. So
absolutely.
I think that's cool.
The actionable part is really important, because one of the really important parts of the material is that you know something when you experience it, and we can tend to just intellectualize about things, and until we can create a drill and actually experience what it's like to be motivated in a certain way, like by processes over end results, let's say, then we don't really understand the depth of that particular concept.
Right. For sure. Yeah, that's really cool. So was Heather having a particular thing that she wanted to work on, or was it that she just knew that there was room to grow in that?
She had a particular
area?
thing, and it was negative self-talk.
Okay.
And it seemed to be structured around self-worth issues. Which,
I think that happens quite a bit, and I don't want to totally generalize here, but I see that a lot with females, especially, that they can be really, really super positive for everyone else, and then when it comes to themselves, they're really hard on themselves.
probably more hard on themselves than guys are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everyone suffers to some degree with, ego and self-worth issues and negative self-talk. But I think there's certain aspects of our society and the way young boys and young girls are socialized that
For sure.
kind of sets up girls, at least that's part of it, to be harder on themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, did you climb with Heather to see what was going on, or was it just did she have a pretty clear picture of, here's what I'm doing, I know it's wrong, what can we do collectively to work on that?
Well, she's clear about the negative self-talk not being helpful.
Yep.
And so the way we were structuring it is we have an in-person session where we'll run them through the fall commit drills, and so that the athlete understands the foundational tenets of the material.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jeff Lotus took her through a day of training in Boulder because I had to come back to Tennessee.
This indoor, outdoor,
It
doesn't matter.
was indoor.
Okay.
And so that took, 4 to 6 hours or something like that. So, but in addition, he also started doing an inquiry work with her where he would bring up one of the negative self-talk things that she was maybe saying to herself.
Right.
And then dig into that, where it was coming from. So
Is he doing this between routes or?
yeah, between routes.
Yeah, okay.
The Warriors Way material so far has really been mostly about identifying the tasks that we have in climbing and then noticing when our attention is distracted off those tasks, getting it back on task.
Yeah.
So almost like sort of a mindfulness meditation kind of process. You become more aware of where you're supposed to have your attention focused, notice when it's distracted, and get it back on task. So kind of a redirecting process.
Yep.
But we're realizing that there are also two other areas that we want to broaden the understanding and application of the material. And one is inquiry, which is more of an intellectual kind of process, where you can bring to light a certain limiting belief or self-talk and then dig into where that's coming from. And a lot of times it has a lot to do with various trauma issues that we have as we're growing up. And everybody suffers from some degree of trauma issues when they're kids, even if they have what you might consider a perfect childhood.
Absolutely.
So it's digging into that in an intellectual way, but then also we're looking for experiential ways to apply that and work through it on a climb. So, for instance, if you what is it like to climb with holding that negative thought in your mind?
Yeah.
And then kind of compare that with what does it feel like when you're actually climbing without that thought, with something else?
Right.
A simple example would be I can't do this, as opposed to you're climbing with the thought in your mind that I can do this. Mm-hmm. Just a simple thing like that. So that's the second kind of prong of what we're working toward. And then the third one is deepening what you might call the flow state, or how to be more in the moment.
Yeah. Cool.
When you're actually in the climbing experience.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to build on those first two, because really the flow state is nothing magical. It's just being able to have attention in a moment, focused on whatever it needs to be focused on in the climbing process, without having the mind distracting your attention, so that you're kind of in sync with the climb mentally and physically. So the third part, we're looking at primarily so far the way we understand it is deepening the awareness process of ourselves.
Right.
And it's still, I mean, Jeff and I are particularly digging into all of this together, and so it's still in experimental stages.
Well, cool. Can we talk a little about it? Have you been working with Heather on those two tenets as well?
I've been working with her on the second one, not the third one.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of super interested in the second one, actually, largely because my fiance has, she's my main climbing partner, and there's a lot of negative self-talk.
Okay.
She's the most positive person at the crag for everyone else. And then as soon as she's on the wall, I can't do it. I'm stuck. This is too hard for me. And she's gotten herself into this process that takes a long time to get comfortable and to send a route that's well below her physical limits.
Right.
So we've been working on trying to shorten that process up slowly. And I'm not very good at it because I tend to be really blunt. And as soon as I see her being negative, I tend to just point it out. And I don't know if that's the right thing. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have been working on with Heather and how to work through this.
Yeah, it's difficult for, people to learn from each other in a relationship. I mean, that's one thing that's probably getting in the way.
So hard.
You could have the same student and not be in that relationship, and she'll probably listen to you just fine.
Yeah, totally.
Even if you're blunt.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be as quick to jump in as I am now, I'm sure, if we weren't in a relationship. That comfortability allows me to just jump in. And by the way, I did speak with Heather, and she said it's okay to talk about this. Yeah.
So,
thanks, Heather, by the way.
But see, we said that there's certain issues around self-worth, like I'm not worthy to be here working on this 14A because all these other climbers that are climbing this grade are so much better than I am.
Right.
Yeah,
totally.
And all climbers, our egos get in there, and we get in a comparison game, and then our attention is all on that, and if we measure up or not. And so we wanted to address that, and to address it, we really need to have the athlete understand motivation. And we basically, there's a lot of ways to understand motivation, but there are two basic ways that we can be motivated. One is toward goals like end results, achieving a certain grade or a certain route.
Right. And a lot of us are tied up in that. The numbers are oftentimes what guides our motivation.
Well, it's society is rolled up in that.
Sure.
That's the way the whole capitalistic society is structured is around that end result, goal-oriented motivation. But then there's a process motivation, and process motivation is more learning-based. Like, what do I need to learn so that I can achieve that end goal?
Yep.
So we looked with Heather. We looked at like what is causing that end result motivation, and how can we shift it toward this learning-based process motivation. We start with understanding that we all have an ego, and the ego likes to feel important.
Yep.
Okay, it likes to feel important based basically on my achievements based compared to other people. So you can go to a crag and people are constantly sizing themselves up, against everybody else that's there. Am I the best climber here or the worst climber or somewhere in between? And then we create certain comfort zones around being, if I'm the best, maybe I don't have to work as hard on this, and I still feel okay about myself. If I'm the worst, then, maybe I can give my full effort to it and don't have any expectations. So we need to look at how the ego tends to put us in some hierarchy with other climbers.
Yeah, I think it was, anytime I have a quote in my mind and I can't think of exactly who it was, I just blame it on Eleanor Roosevelt. I think it's her who said, comparison is the thief of joy. And And I really love that quote because I see so many people, like you were just saying, especially in the gym, which is where I spend a lot of my time, really watching people really comparing themselves. Like, how come he can do that problem and I can't? I've been climbing longer. I did this problem and he didn't. And it's just this constant comparison game, and it takes you right out of where you should be, I think.
It's kind of an extrinsic, external kind of motivation. It's like we get a sense of ourselves and are motivated by what's outside of us. Yeah. Whereas if we can convert that more into an intrinsic motivation where it's coming out of us, like a certain organic desire to just do our best on a climb,
to improve, to get better.
Then it's less comparison. So we understand the ego, and then this is kind of an intellectual process. So I was taking her through an intellectual process and then giving her some experiential tools at the end. So understanding how the ego can do that, and then its effect on attention. So when we're motivated by the end result, and one thing I think is really important about people understanding the Warrior's Way material is it's not a philosophy. It's just a very pragmatic way of understanding how to stay focused and do your best. It's not you should be process motivated because it's really the best way to be. It's
right.
It's going to be really cool, or something like that. No, it's not about that. It's because it's very pragmatic. So if we look at end result motivation compared to process motivation, think about a goal that, Heather wanted to achieve a goal, simply READ, R-E-A-D, at Rifle.
Which she just did, by the way.
Which she just did. Yeah. Right, but so she wanted to achieve that goal, and I said, okay, have you achieved it today? She said, no. It says, okay, that goal is in the future. So if we're motivated by the goal, then we tend to project our attention. If we overvalue it, we tend to project our attention into the future, into things we can't control.
Right. We're not being motivated by something we can do right now.
That's exactly right. We need to be, primarily motivated. It's important to understand that both are helpful.
Right, and they're not exclusive of each other.
No.
They can exist together.
The end result goal can give us vision, give us direction, kind of help us make decisions and take actions that lead us there. But then our primary motivation needs to be the more intrinsic, learning-based motivation, which are processes that occur in the moment, each moment, each minute, each hour, each day that's leading us toward that goal.
Right.
Because the only thing we actually can control is things that happen in the present moment. And those are processes.
Yep. I think that's really cool. I've never thought of, in my head, the two are generally mutually exclusive, and I've never really thought of it as sort of as a percentage thing, it can be, or they piggyback off of each other. You can still be goal oriented and goal motivated, but then to achieve that goal, you're going to move into process motivation, and I think maybe that's the way I am. I think that's what I fall into, because I do like the goals. I do like the end results, but I definitely really love the process and I love digging into it. But my process is always dictated by some end result. So I've never put it together like that. That's pretty cool.
It's your process is dictated by the end result to a degree, in that there are certain things that you need to learn along the way to achieve that.
Yep, exactly.
But if we think about it, achieving the end result occurs just in a split second, right?
Right.
But what is the majority of our life leading up to that? For some people, it's several years working toward a goal.
Yeah, and sometimes that goal is just part of the process anyway. Hopefully that goal is a part of a larger process.
It's a test.
Okay.
It's a test of your learning.
Along the way.
What did you learn along the way? Let's draw a line in the sand here and make sure that you actually can show me that you've learned how to keep it together to do that red point.
Yep.
an important part is to enjoy the journey, to enjoy the learning process that makes up those 5 to 7 years if you're working on a really long goal, so that you can have fun climbing, right? One thing talk to Heather about is that, okay, so you have this negative self-talk, you get frustrated. Why? Why is that happening? Well, it's because didn't achieve or progress as much as you thought you would. And that might be even on working out a crux sequence, right? Maybe make no progress. Like she was working on, I think, China Doll at the trad route that she climbed in Boulder Canyon. And was able to make certain crux moves and then go there another day and have sort of negative progress in a sense and getting frustrated about it. Says, well, let's look at this in a pragmatic way. Like you got the rock. It's not animate, it's an inanimate object. That route has a certain level of skill that's needed.
Yep.
And obviously your skill isn't up to par with the challenge that you're facing, right?
Right.
So when we get frustrated, essentially we want whatever's missing, that learning, for no effort, right?
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
Because it's just a
we just
rock,
want it to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it kind of points toward a way that we can be kind of immature in our process of dealing with stress and challenges. It's like I listened to a podcast that Tim Ferriss did with Chris Summers that I think with gymnastic bodies, and in one place he said that there's a difference between mature athletes and immature athletes, and mature athletes understand that every bit of success that they have requires work. So frustration essentially is wanting to have that work done without
putting in the effort.
Wanting to have achieved the end result without doing that work.
Right.
And that's just an immature way that we approach challenges, and it tends to be largely unconscious because the ego is in there, wants that achievement, the quicker the better, so it can feel good about itself.
Yeah.
So once it started, talking with Heather about this whole structure about the ego, how it needs that achievement motivation, then it causes us to create expectations all around the end result. And then what it does is it causes our attention to be focused in the future and not on, in the moment, on what we actually need to do and learn to achieve the goal.
So are there actionable things that you worked on with Heather to kind of start changing that, what she was being motivated by? It's not as simple as just saying, oh, you need to focus on this instead.
Absolutely.
That's not the end of it.
It's like we talked about a moment ago. You got to find a way to make a drill or something actionable.
Yep.
So it's not like she was not enjoying the learning process. She loved the learning process early on with a project.
Right.
The struggle usually comes when we say, okay, I think I know it enough to start doing the red point effort, right? Because then you create the expectation about, well, I should be able to red point this time or the next time or the next time.
Yeah.
And then that causes a frustration and a negative self-talk when you're not making the process or meeting those expectations. So that was kind of the intellectual way of her understanding that it's not productive for her to be thinking in the way that she was thinking, equating her self-worth with achievement, and creating these kinds of expectations. And then we kind of structured some tools for her to actually apply and see what kind of an effect that had. So the first thing is that she needed to be able to realize that she's more than just herself up there on a climb. Like our ego tends to think it's just us, nobody else is experiencing this. And,
right. I'm the only person who's ever gone through this situation. Yeah.
And so I said that the first thing you need to do is kind of get grounded and expand beyond that limited state.
Yep.
And I said the way to do that is you need to tell your belayer
Yeah. That's
that
super important.
to let you know that you're part of a support group here. You're part of this team that's a climber belayer. You're part of nature. You're part of the larger climbing community. And so I said, make sure your belayer knows this, and then tells you something very specific. Doesn't tell you what you need to do or that you shouldn't get frustrated, but just says, breathe, relax, I'm here for you.
Yep.
It's just the first two, breathing, relax, it connects the athlete back to the body. Starting to get their attention out of their head and woe is me kind of mentality.
Right.
So get connected back with the body, and then realizing that you have a support team here. Sometimes we need to just take a moment to take a breath and get grounded again and connected with our belayer.
Yep.
And then see if she can identify what the limiting thought was. Maybe it's ego related, maybe it's self-worth oriented. And then instead of like fighting it, just allow it to be there. Like you don't have to get rid of it, thinking that it's bad because you had this thought, but rather just allow it and then see if you can label it and understand where it came from.
Yeah.
But then start shifting into, shift that negative self-talk or that frustration into curiosity.
Right.
By just saying, okay, what happened? What can I do differently?
Mm-hmm. How can I improve my situation?
Yeah. And so initially, you fall and you might have a thought like, I suck. Okay, well, that's a statement. And it tends to not leave any options for moving beyond it.
Right.
Whereas curiosity is about questions. Questions are open. What do I need to do differently? What happened to cause the fall? And it engages your attention in a situation where you can kind of work with it and find a way to change your plan. It's like, again, we're the part of the situation that can change. The climb is going to stay the same.
Yep.
So we're looking at how we need to place our feet differently or apply our energy differently or use different handholds or sequences so that we can rise to the level of the challenge of the climb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. So you have a physical reset, which is breathe, and then relax lets you get into that space where you can start asking questions about what it is that's going on.
Yep.
And something I really like and I say often is, when someone's going into a crux section or they're nervous about something, I like to say, I'm with you. And I like to hear my belayer too. And I'm glad you brought up having that conversation before you leave the ground. Is almost every time I leave the ground, especially on something that's going to be difficult for me, I have a conversation with my belayer about the entire route. Like, if, I might struggle here, here's what I need at this part, let me know you're there when I'm at this spot, and that way I know that I'm connected to somebody. I can put that totally out of my head and I can really focus on what's happening right there with me.
You can also, tell them specifically how you'd like to be coached.
Yeah.
If at all.
Yep.
Particularly important in relationships.
Yeah. So did you work with Chris at all on this, or did Heather just relay this stuff to Chris and have him talk to her that way?
Chris,
her husband.
Her husband.
Yep.
No, I just told Heather she needs to, whoever's belaying her, because it's not always Chris,
Sure.
I said, you need to instruct your belayer how you want to be coached. And so the typical coaching in scare quotes here is you've got it, or beta spraying, which is all toward end result.
Yep.
Okay. So it's more helpful, we found, to coach along processes, like reminding to breathe or to relax or to make the next move, or maintain eye contact, or something specific that you can do, loosen your grip, to do whatever task that you're doing, whether it's climbing or resting more effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that you tell the climber they can tell their belayer how they want to be coached, because just the other day, actually, my fiance was on a route, and I know I was being a little harsh, and in the moment I didn't realize I was being harsh, and partially because that's how I like to be coached. Like if I'm trying to learn something, I want somebody pointing out my flaws immediately so I can fix them, and she doesn't like that, but that's where I go with her. And when she came down, she was like, can we try something else? What you're doing comes across to me as negative, so we need to change that. And I think that was huge for me, because then I could approach it totally differently the next time, and we can work through and find what's going to help her avoid this negative self-talk that she has,
right,
that I'm just feeding into unwittingly. So that's pretty cool that you have them talk to their belayer about it. That's a big, important part of being a team, which is what you are when you're on a route.
It seems like, we're going to coach the way we're motivated. Okay.
Yeah.
So and climbers can tend to be motivated toward end results, and then they coach that way too. And so they might say something like, let's say it's a guy and a girl, and the girl's up there leading on lead, of course, but is freaked out and wants to, down climb a move and hang on a bolt. And the guy says, no, climb or fall, and then that freaks out the girl.
Yep.
And just makes it more like a traumatic experience that is not helpful. So it's really important to work out that kind of coaching that you're going to do, beforehand. So you're not just putting someone in a situation that they are not ready for.
Right. A question for you. So, and I'm asking because I want to know your thought on it. Is a lot of times, one of the troubles my fiance has is that as soon as she gets into a situation that causes her a little bit of anxiety, and we know what those situations are before she leaves the ground, like we can spot them, we know what's going to happen. And as soon as she gets there, her automatic response is just take. And we're trying to shortcut this process or shorten the process. And so what I've been doing is just asking, are you sure? Do you think that's a valid technique to use, or is that something that might be making it worse for her?
No, I think it's fine as long as it's worked out beforehand. Like say,
right.
All right, is it when you get up there, you're going to say take, right? Yep. Okay, we got that agreement.
Yep. Yeah, we've been having this conversation. Yeah.
Now, is it okay when you say that for me to say, can you delay for a second, or can you delay for 5 seconds before? I will take and honor your request if you want me to, but can we step into that by first see if you can just stay there for 5 seconds? And if she says, no, I don't think I can do 5 seconds, how about 4? You find a small enough increment that she's willing to agree to,
right,
so that you can get her to engage that. And what will happen is then when she can stay 4 seconds, then next time she might be able to stay 10 and agree to that. Or it might be, well, can you fall instead of taking? Or can you down climb to where you're taking a fall that you're willing to take? She might be too far up above and wants to down climb and hang. Can you just down climb and fall when you're 2 moves above the bolt or something like that? But the really important thing with working with anybody is to find an actionable step that they are actually can take out of their comfort zone. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah. So another question, this is a little like kind of in another direction. This one actually is about me because I do love the process. And I have some clients who also really love the process. And sometimes I'm not sure when to like flip that switch because I like the process of learning moves and learning the more efficient ways. Is there a way to identify when you should be going for that end result, or do you just let the process take you there every time?
I don't know that there's a definitive answer for that. It's probably we each need to find out what works best for us. But maybe something that can help is just being aware if you're just staying working the process because it's comfortable to do that.
Yep.
Like there's such a strong draw for all of us to be in our comfort zone. And if we're working a route and we really like working a route and the process and we never test ourselves,
right,
then we're sort of staying in our comfort zone still.
Yep.
So you might say, well, I think I'm ready to do a red point effort and let's see what happens. Well, if you do it with 5 hangs, then maybe you need to go back and work the process some more. And then after some time with that, then you can go back and do another red point effort, maybe get it with 1 hang. And
so just constantly ask questions, reevaluate.
And just a lot of it, I mean, we're talking mental training, right? So a lot of it is becoming more aware of our motivation and what's going on in our head that can just either that's keeping us in our comfort zone or is actually moving us into distress and dealing with the challenge. And that might be working on the process, or it might be testing ourselves on that red point effort.
Right. So, back to Heather's case, now that I've kind of taken over here and had you give me my own little session here. How do you feel she was progressing through that, or how did she feel she was progressing through it?
Well, we've been talking on the phone about weekly, since about early September, and so the negative self-talk, all around self-worth issue type of things was a real issue during red point efforts, like we talked about, and so.
And not to totally cut you off here, but just in case people are listening who don't know, Heather's not just a random climber. She's a really good climber, one of the best climbers in the country, who climbs. She's done 514 trad, she's done 514 sport,
right? And
she's just a high level, all around climber. So if you think that you're alone at 5'11" having self-worth issues or negative self-talk, it's not true. It happens at these high levels as well.
And I would say it happens even more for elite athletes because they have more pressures from sponsors and expectations from others, and can really benefit from addressing these kinds of issues.
Since I cut you off.
She was working, she had been on Simply Red, I think a few years ago, she said. But
13D in rifle. Right?
13D. And she wanted to go back and, I guess, clean up that project, see if she could send it. And so she worked on it, I think, 2 or 3 visits to rifle and was able to send it, end of September. So the feedback she gave me was that she was able to achieve it pretty quickly and with more of a calm and focused mind.
Good.
Less negative self-talk by applying the tools that we went over. And a big part of that is understanding that we might be able to achieve a goal just as fast if we're frustrated versus curious.
Right.
But what do you want your climbing experience to be like, right?
Sure.
Do you want to have this frustration experience and then just feel great when you achieve the end goal, or do you want the whole thing to be more enjoyable?
Yeah, and you never know where that frustration might be holding you back. If it's your go-to mode, then maybe you aren't aware of how you could climb if you weren't in that state all the time. You know, so it's really easy to say, well, I might climb frustrated, but I climbed 12C or whatever. How do you know that if you're feeling much better about yourself and about your climbing, you won't be climbing 13A?
Right.
You know, you can't know unless you make effort to change those things and try and see.
Yeah, and consider that mental training, at least the way Warrior's Way approaches it, is about attention. Okay. So if our attention is on frustration, we're not solving problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If our attention is on curiosity, then we're digging into the situation, digging into our mind, digging into our body, digging into the rock climb itself, so that we can solve those problems. And we need to solve those problems in order to do that work in order to achieve the goal. It's just no two ways around it.
Yeah. You know, something that I employ with my own climbing and I urge a lot of my clients to do, and I actually just started a new project like this yesterday, that I like to find a route or a boulder problem or something near the beginning of each season that is totally my anti-style, might be something that I know is very height dependent and is really incredibly difficult for me, but is at a relatively low grade, you know. And a couple of seasons ago, I climbed 514. Yesterday, I started working on a 12D that I was totally stoked to be able to do all the moves on, because I tried it a decade ago and got totally shut down on 4 moves, I think. And yesterday, I was able to come up with interesting creative beta to make these giant reaches that I can't even physically span work for me. And I really love that, because it early in the season, it takes me out of that, you know, that expectation of climbing 514. Like, I want to climb 514 again. And it gets me right back to, I want to challenge myself, you know, and I want to work through these problems that each route throws at me individually.
Right.
You know, and so I think that's an important tool for me and for a lot of my clients, is to
I think
push yourself.
You're describing, you know, let's look at weaknesses and something that's not going to be something that we're particularly skilled at, and let's work on it. You know, let's improve that so that overall we can be better athletes. And again, it's so easy to fall into sort of a comfort-based motivation to feed the ego, to just do things that we know we're good at.
Yeah. And as a byproduct, I think it puts me in a good place. Like, it sets me up well for the season, and not being so goal motivated, because I know I could go that way if I allowed myself, you know, and really started thinking more about the numbers. And it's hard not to sometimes. I mean, that we're surrounded by it. So,
yeah, I mean, again, you know, we want to do both. You know, having a goal can really focus us on, give us a vision for the kind of training that we want to do and need to do, but then be psyched about doing that training and the climbing that leads you there.
Yep. And kind of this just popped into my head. I'm jumping all over the place here, but rewinding back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, we were talking about comparison and that leading to this goal motivation. And then, do you find that you can take that comparison and use it in a healthy way, similar to how an end goal can also lead you into the process? Because I definitely find that I compare, but I don't think I do it in an unhealthy way.
I think so.
But I'd be willing to work on that if
well, I think we can
help.
use other people's accomplishments as examples of what is possible for us. I think we're constantly doing that anyway.
For sure.
We see we have mentors, you know, that we probably learned from, you know, throughout all our climbing career.
Definitely, yeah.
And if we're seeing that as something to strive for and to make ourselves better, I don't see that as a negative thing. It's when we're doing it in a sense to determine our self-worth. How worthy am I as a person? Well, it's important just to make self-worth a non-issue.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm worthy, a worthy human being with all the flaws and skills and abilities I have, period. Well, it's not even an issue. Self-worth becomes an issue when we go into the external world where we're comparing our abilities and our strengths and weaknesses with those of others. So maybe if we keep it more as an internal, from an internal perspective, seeing other people as an example for something that we can internally strive and be motivated toward doing similar, then that can be helpful.
Cool. So where does it go from here? I know you guys are kind of developing your next levels. You just said, the next of the 3 things that you're really focused on.
Right.
Where do you take it from here?
Well, we take it into the non-climbing public. I'm working on a book for introducing the material to non-climbing public and then creating a workshop around that.
Cool. Very cool.
But also, there's a lot of things going on in climbing right now, as you know, like going into the Olympics.
Yeah.
And so we have several trainers in the U.S. and 3 abroad, and collectively we want to help climbing in the mental training realm to be a great sport to watch in the Olympics and beyond. So we're working with USA Climbing, working with AMGA and CWA, and also there's a International Rock Climbing Research Association that
just had their summit here.
In August in Telluride, and Jeff Lotus and I were there. I did a short presentation on mental training, and Eric Hurst was there, and so a lot of people from around the world were sharing information, and so they're going to have another one in a couple of years in Chamonix. And I'm working on a research project on measuring attention to do kind of a scientific research project, because everything that I've done with the material has been, trial and error, but I've never really done something scientific to measure why what we do in the clinics actually, how it tangibly benefits climbers.
And some people need those studies and numbers to believe it. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have that.
No, I think it's great. And, I can see the benefits from the students that go through the clinics, but I'd also like to understand a little bit more scientifically myself about why it's what we're doing is beneficial.
Yeah. Cool.
So working with that.
You got your hands full.
Yeah, and then that's going to lead into working more with teams, climbing teams that are doing the training for moving toward the Olympics.
Yeah.
So.
Super cool. And where can people kind of find you? I know you do clinics all over the place. Is there like a master schedule online on your website or something like that?
Yes, warriorsway.com.
Yeah.
And
that's you and all your other trainers as well?
Yeah, I post all of their trainings on our event page. And we have a trainer in Brazil, one in Spain, and one in Mexico, and then including myself, we have 8 in the U.S., spread around the country from California to New River Gorge.
Yep.
So, we can do, there's clinic schedules on upcoming events there. You can also do individual training, one-to-one, via phone and email. It's helpful to have it like an in-person session first.
Sure.
To have gone maybe through a clinic, somewhere in a person's local area, and that's
what you did with Heather, basically.
Yeah, that's what we did with her. So, good. It's nice to be able to have more trainers, so that
spread the word around.
Yeah, it can be available in more places more frequently. So.
Yeah, it's cool for me to hear what it is that you guys are doing outside of the safe falling clinics and things like that I've heard about for years, and I really like the direction that you've kind of outlined here. of mindfulness and talking about motivation and where your motivation lies and how to move it into another direction. I think that's something that's could be used by almost everybody that I've ever climbed with. It's pretty rare that I've climbed with someone, myself included, who couldn't use that sort of training or that sort of work in some way or shape or form. So.
Yeah, I think everybody can benefit from it to varying degrees. The challenge with mental training is that a lot of people don't think they need it, and they have preconceived ideas about how they're going to benefit, and maybe they have the same sort of things with physical training. But with mental training, you could even read the Rock Warriors Way book or Espresso Lessons and misunderstand what it's saying because you're just at an intellectual level when you're reading.
Right.
Unless you go to a clinic with a trained trainer that can help you understand the material and apply it.
That's how you're seeing it. Yeah.
Because the reason I'm saying that is I've seen people that actually say, I read Rock Warriors Way, just go for it.
Yeah.
And that's not what
not
it
the
teaches.
message.
You know? It's more you need to take an appropriate risk. You need to understand the incremental learning process. And all of that has to do with developing awareness and understanding your motivation and how to focus your attention better.
That's really cool. I'll definitely be sending people your way because I think that I come across that with a lot of clients who are goal motivated and get stuck because of it and have a hard time altering their motivation. And knowing that that's something that you work with and are having success working with, then I'll be sending people your way for sure to work on that kind of thing. So I think it's a huge part of climbing. So
yeah, it is. It's the physical part, the mental part, being out in nature. If we work in all of those areas, we can have an overall much better climbing experience.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks for sitting down with me. I know things are starting to get a little loud here in the background. We're at Rocktoberfest and it's just starting to ramp up a little bit. So thanks for taking time out and sitting down. This was a ton of fun.
Nice talking to you.
We can definitely do it again. So
sounds great, Chris. Thanks,
Arno. Wow, big thanks to Arno for sitting down with us again, taking time out of his busy Rocktoberfest schedule. I really appreciate it. And like I said before, Arno's got this thing dialed in, and I think we all have quite a bit to learn from this process versus goal-based motivation that we talked about here. And it's something that I thought I really had pretty dialed in, and I don't think I do anymore. I think I've still got quite a bit to learn, and I'm glad Arno exposed that because I'd like to go into every situation that way. You can check Arno out at warriorsway.com, and he's got trainers all over the country and elsewhere in the world as well. So if you're looking for some help mentally, tactically, how to approach the challenges that you're finding, then definitely reach out to Arno at warriorsway.com. And as far as we go here at the Power Company, I've got shirts up on the website by Thanksgiving. They're actually up there now. They're just not live for you guys until I have my shipping worked out. So those will be up in the next week or so. We've still got some openings in our pre-written app plans. If you're interested in those, check us out. And if you want to become a patron of the podcast, we appreciate all the patrons we've got so far. You can do that at patreon.com/powercompanypodcast. And the best thing that you can do for us if you want to help out is share us on your social medias. You can find us on the Facebooks. You can find us on the Instagrams. But no Twitters. We don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
Maybe don't know.
This time, 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 power, power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. This time to build power. This It's time to build. It's time to build. It's time to build. It's time to build.